Hi, this is O'Connor and welcome to the ChatGPT interface, and we just want to go through the back-end part of chapter 6 where we're looking at horizontal and vertical analysis. And yes, I could go through the book and regurgitate what's already in the textbook, but why don't I show you using some AI that all of you have some access to possibly. What I mean is I'm working with a paid version of ChatGPT, so just be aware that this is what you can do if you're paying $20 a month to access GPT. You may be able to do what I'm talking about with the free version, but let's just see how we go. All right, so let's start with our first prompt, and that is working with Woolworths Group. And let's just see what happens, or let's just see what GPT comes up with. All right, please go to Woolworths Group. I gave it the website. Please summarize the profit and loss for 23. Provide a basic balance sheet for the group. Okay, and this actually compares with my own visual of the profit and loss of the Woolworths Group, so I know that this is correct to start with. All right, so let's start with and ask for a little bit more detail. And why not? Can you provide the full profit and loss report? Okay, so let's see what happens. And there we have the full report coming up. More details, cost of goods sold, gross profit, operating expenses, EBITDA, and then we've got the taxation expense and so forth, and various segment performances. All right, so let's have a look at what we can do now. And also we've got the balance sheet too, which is the total assets, liabilities, and so forth. We can ask GPT to, can you provide a full breakdown of the profit, loss, and balance sheet reports. And there we have it. It's doing some analyzing, and it's going to give us a full breakdown. And there we have it by tables. So we can look this up in a full detail. If we click on here, we can expand the table, and then we can see the full details of the profit and loss. And there we have the balance sheet and very rough categories in billions, but we want to pull them out for further horizontal and vertical analysis. Next, we want to do cash flow. So let's have a look at cash flow. What we're doing now is prompting the AI to just go into the database of Woolworths, their annual report, and to pull out data. And so once we are comfortable that this data does represent the annual report, we can then see the cash flow, the activities, and what we want to do now is got the detailed breakdown. And so what I want to do now is we can actually ask AI to undertake a horizontal analysis of the balance sheet. So what do we mean by the balance sheet? And we put into a table. Horizontal analysis means 2022, 2023. So in other words, it's analysis of the change in the balance sheet from one period to the next. Whereas vertical analysis is actually looking at relationships between components of the balance sheet or the profit and loss statement or the cash flow statement. So as you can see with this horizontal analysis, now we have the 2023, we have the 2022, and then we have the change and the change in percentage. And then we can ask it to keep the data. Please keep the data to a maximum of 2 decimal. All right, and might even do it again and make it even perfect. So let's just see what it comes up. I know it's a bit slow with all the prompting, but this is what we need to be aware of. what's happening. And so we've got 2 decimal points and the change percentage. So the change of 5%, 7%, 5% current liabilities change over time. And when you look at the percentages, then it's easier to compare with the change with Coles, the change of Aldi, the change with its competitors. All right, so let's have a look at the profit and loss statement. Okay, so we're doing horizontal analysis, and that's where we're just looking for change. Remember, when we go into a little bit more detail, then red flags can start to pop up, but at the moment AI is still giving us some very aggregated versions of the financial statements. But if we look at it in a little bit more detail, we can see that there are 12 items here. We can ask it to break out operating expenses, because that is a great area, or break out revenue. Can you, so we can ask it, can you redo with a breakdown of so we're getting it to provide a little bit more detail, because if we're doing a forensic analysis, we're not really interested in the total revenue. We're interested in maybe segmented revenue. We're interested in different types of revenue to look for red flags. Okay, and so now we have a breakdown of revenue and the operating expenses, and as you can see, Australia, New Zealand, Big W, Endeavour Drinks, and we can see the change that is happening here. They're all single-digit percentage changes, and so maybe a seasoned fraud investigator may say, well, okay, there's nothing unusual about that. And then we've got the operating expenses, selling, distribution, administration expenses. Quite little change there. All right, so let's keep going on this horizontal analysis. Of the profit and loss statement. So let's, what we want to do now is go over to vertical analysis. Can you provide a vertical analysis of the profit and loss and balance sheet for 2022 and 2023? Now remember, why I say 2022 and 2023 is because the vertical analysis does not assume 2 periods. It only assumes the period in which you nominate. So I want to know how the ratios of items together look in 2022 and how the ratios of items together look in 2023. And let's see what it comes up with. It's analysing, but it's doing a good job, and we need to encourage the AI so it can be your friend and not get angry with you. And so now we have a vertical analysis. So let me explain briefly. The vertical analysis, if we look at 2023 and 2022, we have the change and change percentage. But what we're trying to do is, with vertical analysis, is we may say total revenue is 100%. And so 75% of that revenue came from Australia, 9% came from New Zealand, 6% came from Big W, and so forth. Whereas if you just look at the numbers, we're just looking at 48, 6 million, 6 billion, 4 billion, it may not mean much. But here, now we're looking at a percentage. Australian food revenue makes up 75% of the total revenue. And so with vertical analysis, you create a base. With the profit and loss statement, the base is total revenue. You could say the base to be profit, but it's better to say total revenue. Expenses make up of that. So it's 75 in 2022, it's 75% in 2023. And so you may say 9%, 9%, 6, 6, 8, 8. And you see there's not much change from year to year. So obviously there's no red flags popping up with this vertical analysis, looking at basically the within year relationships of these 17 items with total revenue in 2022 compared to the within year relationships of all these items with total revenue in 2023. Remember, these two columns represent percentages, not billions. And that's what makes vertical analysis so powerful, because it enables you to spot red flags very, very quickly, especially if you dive into operating expenses, especially if you dive into the cost of goods sold. And maybe we could ask, can you pull out more detail of costs of goods sold and provide a vertical. Let's just see if it can pull out some little bit more detail of cost of goods sold, because remember, in the textbook, revenue is one sure red flag area for fraud, and also inventory is another big red flag area for fraud. So we need to pull out cost of goods sold so we can see if there are any red flags in the inventory. And so the cost, again, it's given a segmented view, it hasn't broken it down, and maybe in the annual report it's not given us that, and I need to find a better prompt to get AI to find that. But again, as 100% of cost of goods sold, the Australian food represents 3/4, New Zealand 10%, Big W 7, 8%, and then 7% for Endeavour drinks. All right, enough on the balance sheet and profit margin. That is, what are we talking about? The horizontal and vertical analysis. We could go further and ask it to do forensic analysis. So for example, we could ask it to do that to see what it will come up with us. And in some ways, that's a prelude to what we're going to be looking at in chapters later this semester. But already you can ask AI to give you prompts to what to look for in terms of the revenue analysis, the cost of goods sold, the gross profit analysis, operating expenses analysis, EBITDA analysis, net profit, the balance sheet analysis, and cash flow analysis. And you can even ask it to give some red flags or forensic insights. And in some ways, the Woolworths profit and loss and balance sheet, not being in a high growth industry like technology, we would expect that there may not be many red flags at the aggregate amount of data that we have, but the red flags may show up in more detail if we're able to feed the AI a little bit more detail about precise inventory levels, a little bit more detail about particular expenses, or a little bit more detail about a breakdown in revenues. And obviously we're working with annual reports that may not have all of that information. So just keep that in mind. And the big learning point of this schedule here, this module, is to I just want to show you practically how we go about horizontal and vertical analysis, and just show you that AI, as we are getting more and more access to in the cloud, with many, many versions coming along every month, is becoming a much more powerful tool to allow you to do fraud investigation work. But remember the one caveat: if you're working with AI in the cloud, that means your confidential data of your client is going into the public domain, and that is a big no-no when you are doing fraud investigation work. So you need to have a private AI system to actually do this analysis for you. But for the point of this unit, I just want to show you how powerful the AI currently is, and you have access to this type of AI already. even for a small subscription of $20 a month. Enough for now. See you in class, and thank you for tuning in to this part 2. Bye for now.